Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Nobody, and I'm bringing you another episode of Making Nobody Happy. And before I get started, I'm going to provide a trigger warning because, just so you know, I'm not saying anything controversial myself, but I'm going to refer to a case where someone referred to saying something controversial, and that person got fired for even referring to it. So, just so you know, that's in the offing. So, the thing that brought this to my mind was I was listening to John McWhorter a while back, and he was very upset about a writer for the New York Times who was fired for referring to the N word. Like he wasn't using it; he just referred to its existence. Like I said, not using it, referring to the fact that it exists, referring to the fact that someone else has used it, that it was a historical and linguistic fact, even if he wasn't himself going to directly present it, not even in referring to it, he wasn't even going to say it. So this caused me to sit back and think about why he was so upset and um, some of the instincts that he was feeling, some of the emotional reactions people are feeling, the reasons why people did this. What it really made me think about was the intersection of fear, rebellion, and virtue. And I think the question that really comes up in a case like this is, can you actually make people better, like make them more good, more virtuous by force and by fear? Uh, Now, I just have to tell you, I have always had a very rebellious streak. When I was told, as I think a kindergartner, we would take turns putting up and taking down the flag at our elementary school. And I remember when it was my turn to do it, and I was told not to drop the flag. I was told I couldn't drop the flag during the flag ceremony. And just because they had told me that, I let it drop a bit just to find out why they had told me to do that. Would it somehow bring disaster? Would the nation fall if I did that? I also remember very clearly, many times actually, um, not standing for the national anthem at basketball games. Now, I was not making any kind of political statement. I was in a small town. I didn't have any problem with the national anthem. I played it in band, I sang it in choir. Of course, I was always performing the national anthem all the time. I even sang it at a Rockies game once in Denver. Um, but I remember just not standing, and it was just because they had told everyone to stand. So I'm not saying that I was being brave or clever. I was just stubborn, and I didn't like being expected to do something without being told why. I was very reluctant to do something just because someone said to do it and everybody else did it. Now, I have never had any possible motivation to use the N word because I don't see why anyone would. Like it's a word of the past. I suppose, like some people, if it's your job, if you're a law professor or something, or you're doing some research, like sure, it might come up that you need to refer to it just as professionally, and that's very much John McWhorter's position. He's like, it's silly that we can't even say this word in a professional context. Like, how weird is that? And he's someone who's thought a lot about that subject. He has a book about the words that you can't say. I think it's Seven Wicked Words or something like that. I might be confusing that in my mind with George Carlin. And of course, there's always people like comedians who want to push those limits and say the things you can't say. Now, I was never that sort of person. Like I didn't. I remember the first time I ever swore by accident, and I think I was in high school. I was maybe a junior in high school. So of course, I would never have any reason to ever want to use the N word. But it's strange because the rebellious part in me, seeing things like this, makes me feel tempted to say it, not as a pejorative, not about anyone or against anyone, but just to say it out loud to see if the sky falls, to see if it eradicates us as humans, to break the hold that it has on us, to prove that that's just a word. In the same way that, like, I didn't stand for the anthem and it didn't cause the nation to collapse. I let the flag drop. It didn't burst into flames and airplanes didn't fall out of the sky. It's just that bit of me that feels that rebellion against this sort of group pressure. Now, don't feel any desire to say it so that I could say it. There's no need to say it. Like I said, I don't see why anyone really needs to, except they have some professional context where it's required of them. Um, but it'd be nice if it was possible to not say it freely, if you understand the difference there. Like, it's we don't say it because we're adults, because we're intelligent and humane people. Um, Not because there's some sort of immense threat of a mob hanging over our head, because there's always going to be some people for whom mob threat is an insufficient inducement, and also for whom the threat of the mob might actually make them want to push the other way. I'll be honest, that's how I feel. I have no internal inducement. Just being threatened by the mob what makes you want to push back against it. And the fact that I would have these feelings makes me realize, okay, then this is a crazy situation. Like, this is an absolutely crazy situation. Like, the whole time before, when no one ever told me I couldn't say certain things, I never had any reason to see them. I didn't even think about them. I didn't think anyone would think about them. Because why would you? They're completely just unuseful words to maintain in a modern lexicon. But I will say, I have grown somewhat as a person. I'm a little less rebellious than I used to be. I'll also say I actually feel like I understand now why you're not supposed to drop the flag. And this was what I didn't understand as a child. It's not about the flag, it's a ceremony with certain conventions that are symbolically allowing you to participate in a ritual that teaches you about the need to maintain a level of basic respect for your country, because without it, without what your country represents and what the flag is representing to you, without that, your world could collapse and you could lose something really important. So it's the same with the anthem. The song doesn't need us to stand to exist, to be what it is. Like, it isn't necessary that if we don't stand for the national anthem, it somehow generates some literal disaster. But by standing, we reaffirm our collective belonging and our commitment to the unity of nationhood, and we show that we value it, and that's why it matters. So I still don't think that dropping a flag or not standing is a big deal. Like, I would burn a flag even just, and I know some people don't like that, but I'm the sort of person who say, yeah, I'd burn a flag just to make the point that actually I could burn a flag and it's just a cloth. But in part, that's because it's not like I'm actually attacking the idea in doing that. Whereas I understand for other people that is what they're doing. But I still feel, well, it's a flag. Like I said, I've come to understand why it matters. I've come to understand what it stands for, especially people who have sacrificed an immense amount for it. I do live in a very military town, and I understand why the flag means so much to them. And it's because it's everything that's behind it. You know, it's not just the flag, it's everything that they have done to preserve the flag and the things that it represents around the world. So, like I said, I could drop a flag. I could not stand for the national anthem. I could do that, and it wouldn't harm me or America because I know where I stand with America. We have that negotiated. But because I see the value in the symbolism, I now freely choose to engage in it. I freely choose not to stay sitting instead of being mechanistically compelled. So I make a free choice now because I understand to stand for the anthem. I make a free choice now to respect the flag, to show it honor because I understand. And that actually worked for me, not the you have to. So for a rebellious person like me, that's actually a pretty good conclusion to come to. Now, a more reasonable person than me would have just engaged in the rituals and learned the implied lessons from doing them, and they wouldn't have had to spend decades puzzling it out intellectually. Now, my point about this, and this is tying all these examples together because they're all examples of social taboos that we set up, one from kind of one side of the political spectrum, one from another side of the political spectrum, but they're all these big social taboos that we set up that we can't cross. And my point about all these cases, showing my own journey with sort of coming from a small town, this sort of right-wing taboos that in fact deliberately violated. I deliberately violated those taboos because that was the sort of person that I am. My point is that tyranny and fear as tactics are not good ways to produce good character or really motivate behavior. Now, they do work on small children to some degree. They work on very shallow minded people to some degree. But past that sort of minor, let's set the limits point, it tyranny and fear only work as a restraint on evil. They don't act as a positive force. You need more than mere force and mere threat to actually make people better than they are, to make them good. Like, you can't create brotherhood between people through making them terrified of each other, through making them afraid, through making them just be always in fear and walking on eggshells of some misstep. It's the same thing. You can't create patriotism just by fear, just by saying, you can't do that, don't do that, you better not do that thing. Like that's not going to create patriotism. You, like I said, you can set limits on negative behavior, but that's all it is. It's a limit. It's a limit on how bad things can be, on how far they can go, but it's not actually going to produce virtue. It's not actually going to produce good character. It's not going to produce the desire to do good. And that is really what we want. What we really want in these situations, like, why do we not want people to say the N-word? It's because we want people to love one another, to respect one another, to live in harmony with one another. That's what we actually want. We want the brotherhood of humanity among us. We want to be giving people the due and the kindness and respect they deserve as equal humans. It's the same thing with the flag and the anthem. We do these things because we want people to understand what a gift we have in the country we've been given, the freedoms we've been given, the sacrifices that were made for it, the costs and prices that are paid every day, the opportunities it provides for us, the unity and brotherhood out of a terribly divisive world that it has brought us, as fragile as that is. It's trying to remind us to value it, to value what went into it, to value each other, to value the thing. And the way to teach people to value that isn't to just make them afraid of crossing the line. It's to actually remember what the goal is. And remember, you need to do more than just that. Your goals need to be positive, not just negative. You can't just teach people what to fear or what to hate or what to censor. You actually need to make people fall in love with the good thing that you desire. And that's the sort of activism you should really be doing, is making the case for how great something is and how much we all want to pursue it. And that sort of articulation, which is almost more a work of art or a work of relationship, that is a far harder, far more complex thing than just censoring people. If you're a parent, you'll understand you have to set lots of rules as a parent. But in some ways, even though following through on the rules is difficult, the easy thing is to decide which things you shouldn't do. The hard thing is really setting up something your children want to pursue and getting them invested in it and getting them pursuing it, so that actually they're avoiding the mistakes you want them to avoid, because they're actually pursuing the thing that is worth pursuing. And so I think when we look at the world and we look at the approaches we take to each other, especially when we're getting moralistic about things, especially when we start applying things like fear and threat and group and mob pressure, we need to remember that only takes us so far. It only does so much. And there's some people who, because of who they were, it'll naturally actually just cause them to push back, regardless of what it is. Even if it's something that's a terrible idea, like a child, they'll say, well, you told me not to, so of course I'm going to do it. Like Tracy Jordan in 30 Rock. He gets told, just don't do any dog fighting, and the first thing he feels the need to do is go do some dog fighting, even though he finds it sickening. But that's my point. Some of us are just kind of bloody-minded people, where the very fact that we've been told not to do it convinces us to act against it. Whereas someone like me, if you do truly make a pitch to me, if you show me why I should do something, what it means, give me the positive reason to pursue it, so that I can actually exercise my own agency, so that it becomes about exercising agency rather than trying to remove my agency. that really works on me. That gets me excited. That gets me moving forward. And I think that's something we all need to remember is you can make people scared. You can make people scared of other people. You can make them scared of other kinds of actions. But if you don't ever show people what they should be aiming at, telling them what to avoid is just going to leave them frustrated and frightened and ultimately rebellious. And that's all I have to say for today. We'll see you next time.